The first day that I saw ChatGPT and realizing a tool out there that was capable of doing exactly what I did made me sit up and take notice a little bit. And I decided I needed to be a part of the solution.
This tool is becoming so over-encompassing.
We call it cognitive offloading, handing over things that maybe should be human to AI. We've never had a technology this good at imitating humanity. It can say all the right things that makes people feel seen and important, but it's important to know about. There's no rules or laws or accountability when something goes wrong with this technology.
There are millions of people put in information into AI. Where is that information going?
We don't know because nobody is making them tell us. They really are collecting your data, everything about how you shop, when you shop, what you buy, and selling it to other companies so that they can advertise directly to you.
One valuable thing, an awareness thing to make sure it's safe for them. What would those two things be?
Embrace radical humanity.
What happens when a technology powerful enough to guide your every move starts changing how you think, work, and look for direction? This week I sit down with Rebecca Bultsma, AI ethicist and responsible AI adoption strategist, who turned a moment of uncertainty into purpose the day ChatGPT launched. Together, we explore the tension between innovation and ethics, the hidden cost of convenience, and what it means to find balance in a world moving faster than our understanding. Because AI isn't just shaping our future, it's quietly rewriting how we find our way. Rebecca, it is such a pleasure to see you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so happy to be here with you and see you again.
Yes, it's been, you mentioned earlier, 10 years.
Probably 10
10
years.
years.
It's been a long time.
Wow, my goodness. So you're doing a lot of great things, and I wanted to talk about those great things today, especially in this space of artificial intelligence. So right now, you are an AI ethicist, and talk a little bit about that. What is an AI ethicist?
It's a loaded question. I don't know if that's the sole way like I would identify, but it's primarily what I do. It turned out I'm really good at using AI and explaining it to people. And the more time I spent doing that, the more concerns I had about how the technology would be used, who would make sure it was used in a way that was fair and didn't hurt people. And there was nobody really doing that work. And so I started doing research and doing that work. So primarily that's what I do is I talk about all the very cool, latest, greatest things about generative AI. But I also talk a lot about all the ways this could go wrong and the ways that we need to safeguard and things we also need to be thinking about to keep the conversation balanced.
So I want to talk a little bit about that. You wrote something. You said the day ChatGPT came out was a turning point for me. In my research, I studied turning points through transformative learning theory. We call them disorienting dilemmas, moments that shake your assumptions and force a new perspective. So take us to that moment. What was that moment of perspective shaking for you?
I think there was two actually. The first was the day that I saw the technology for the first time. Like most people, I think I came across it on TikTok. I saw somebody writing a whole essay with ChatGPT the day it launched. And it shook me because at that point, I'd been working in like communications related roles. At that point in particular, I was working in like a pure communications role where I wrote for a living and realizing that there was going to be a tool out there that was capable of doing exactly what I did made me sit up and take notice a little bit. And then the second turning point was when I started realizing and thinking about all the issues connected to it several months later and realizing that nobody had any clue what was going on. Nobody, not even the people building it. That was a turning point for me, and I decided I needed to be a part of the solution.
So talk a little bit about that turning point. So it wasn't just as easy as you saying, I'm working in this communications role. AI came out and then I just jumped into AI. There must have been a huge life change and decision that had to go into that. And especially going into something that, was new for you as well. How did you reconcile through that process?
Well, I leaned into the technology initially because I just wanted to understand it. And it turned out I was really, really good at using it because you completely control generative AI, ChatGPT, with effective communication, regular human communication, like I'm talking to you right now. The better you are at that, the better you can get it to work for you. And I learned that early on. And I realized I was naturally suited to work with the technology. So I started using it and experimenting with it in a lot of different ways, and then publicly learning and sharing what I was learning online on LinkedIn. And I realized there was space for someone to translate this. There was no one who could explain it to me that other than people who worked in computer science, and we're talking about things like transformer architecture and all of these computer science things. So I started trying to understand it and then explain it to other people in a way that made sense. And so I recognized that I was naturally suited for it. And I just started experimenting with it initially. As I got busier and more people were asking me to come and help them understand it, I ended up at a point where I'd taken the max number of vacation days from my real job in communications. And I was working somewhere that was not interested in the technology at the time, or at least in me as the one to teach them about it. It's hard to have other people see you in any other way than the way that they've always seen you. And I had to make a decision about staying safe and staying in my job and giving up the opportunities that were coming my way to dive more into the technology, or take a leap of faith and step away and see what happened.
What was the key decision, I guess, for you when it came to making that change? Because you mentioned, and I can imagine a lot of people feel that way. They're in a position, they're in a
Mm.
role, they're in a career where they're not given the ability to do the things that they want to do. They're not being recognized. I love what you said. When people see you a certain way for a certain amount of time, it's hard for them to see you any differently, and that may keep people stuck. How did you break through though, Rebecca? How did you make that I guess decision to just pull through and do this? Because a lot of people feel the way you feel, but they're stuck.
Mm. It was a process. I look back because I'm a list person. So I would make lists and pros and cons lists. And I would buy like books about like making like really, really good decisions and weighing everything. And the more I made lists, the more I realized it boiled down to two things. It was either the security and being safe, or being happy. And I felt initially that it would be irresponsible for me to just put the entire financial burden of, our family, whatever, onto my husband and just leave a well-paying job that was secure for life, that I was good at, that paid well and had benefits. Uh, but I wasn't happy. But I did, you know, decide to stay, and I knew it was the wrong decision. And after a couple of days of it, just knowing in my guts that it was the wrong decision, I talked to my husband about it again. And he was like, you have to just do it. You have to just try. I'll handle everything. And he made it a safe decision, which I recognize a lot of people don't have the luxury of. But I expect that I probably would have done it anyway, because I think something inside me knew that it needed to happen, and I couldn't ignore the pull towards something more, towards something different.
You're obviously in a good place now. You seem very happy. Take us to that moment when you discovered ChatGPT. What was your initial reaction?
I was I was amazed. It was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen. It was something out of a movie. Watching something write, poems and essays, and in hindsight, compared to where we are now, it was very rudimentary, but it was just incredible. I had a moment that was almost like you see in a Hollywood show where everything kind of slows down and you're like, this is important. This is a big deal. This is a turning point in history. And for weeks after, I was like, why is not everybody talking about this? I would try to talk to people about it for like a year in my immediate vicinity, and nobody really cared or had heard about it. So I found connections online and followed people who were also talking about it and experimenting with it. But I knew something inside me knew this was going to matter. This was going to change everything.
So you mentioned earlier that you teach people and make them understand what AI is ultimately. So
Mm,
I guess this is probably a very broad question, but what is artificial intelligence?
it's a great question. Artificial intelligence is a really broad term, kind of like electricity, right? It's just like a broad form of technology. We've been using it for a long time. Your earliest Yahoo or Gmail account or AOL account used AI to sort through patterns in data and determine what was spam or not spam in your email. This latest type of AI, on November 30th, 2022, Sam Altman, the head of OpenAI, just honestly wrote a tweet or an X post that said, "Hey, we developed this thing, check it out here." And that's when it kind of exploded into public consciousness. This generative AI that can create brand new things out of essentially nothing, just based on commands, based on prompts. And 1 million users in 5 days, 100 million users in 5 weeks. It exploded. It took off. I think they have almost 1 billion users now of just ChatGPT, and it's exploded out from there. But really, what this type of AI is, generative AI, is AI that creates brand new things: music, videos, pictures, text, basically anything you want. Your imagination is your only limit.
What's interesting about that is that people talk about AI as part of innovation. When I think about innovation, I think about innovation in a way of you're creating something from your own experience, from your own imagination. AI can now take whatever your blue sky end product is and build all of that for you without you having to do the work. So when we think about that tension that comes up a lot between
Mm.
innovation and ethics, the ethical aspect of, am I writing this essay or is AI writing this essay? What are your thoughts there? Like, how do we reconcile with the fact that this tool is becoming so over encompassing when it comes to basic thought, ideation, problem solving, and taking that away from a lot of people who are using this to essentially fill that gap?
You're touching on a lot of really big, important topics, and the first of which is this idea of ethics. And ethics is inherently murky because uh, it differs from person to person, context to context, society to society, right? Not tipping in Canada would be kind of unethical. But in the UK, let's say, it's not really expected. It wouldn't be unethical for you to not leave a tip. And so the idea of ethics is tricky in general, and it's not very binding either, right? Like no AI company is going to change what they're doing based on somebody's murky idea of whether it's good or bad. But you touch on some really interesting things that I spend a lot of time researching. The first of which is we call it cognitive offloading. This idea of us handing over things that maybe should be human to an AI or a computer, and what does that cost us, and what do we lose in the process? So that's a conversation we have with like a lot of educators. They're worried about kids not ever learning how to write properly or, you know, critically think through an essay writing process. We worry about us as professionals. How does it change how good I am at my job? Or are all of the ideas just recycled? Is everybody faking it? Am I talking to an AI? Is your email written by AI? Does it matter? And then finally, how does it change the way that we interact as people and our relationships? We're starting to have a lot of questions around that and see a lot of evidence that kind of supports this idea that it is going to be fairly harmful because we've never had a technology in the history of the world that has been this good at imitating humanity. It sounds very human. It can say all the right things that make us feel good as a society while we're in the throes of a loneliness epidemic. There's now something to fill that gap that makes people feel seen and important and listens to them without judgment and tells them they're amazing. And what happens when kids or people start choosing those artificial connections over human connections? How does that change how we feel about each other? How does that change our levels of empathy? How does it change so many things? So these are all like, you're asking all the questions that drove me into this field, these big, important things that what I find fascinating is there's no really good answers right now. And so that keeps me very engaged as interest and interested because my biggest core value is curiosity. And so I wake up every day to see what's going on. And a lot of it's really negative and it's not great, but it's important to know about so that we can affect real change and raise the flags before what? I don't know. It's too late, but at least get some guardrails in place because that's the other thing. There's no rules or laws or accountability when something goes wrong with this technology. There's nobody accountable right now because there's no real rules. And so it's just kind of a murky place to be right now for everybody.
Do you think the effects of the impact of AI on human relations, as you mentioned, cognitive abilities, authenticity, do you think because AI is so new, we just haven't had enough studies or understanding on it? Is it something we're still learning on how it's going to impact our generations?
I think absolutely. We're learning stuff every day. There's been some really tragic cases of youth who have made these chatbots their best friends and their sole confidants, and these chatbots have encouraged them to commit suicide. And it's incredibly tragic. And there are plenty of adults who are experiencing AI psychosis, we call it, which is essentially people forget that the AI isn't real. They really believe that it's real or what it's telling them is true. And these are not crazy people. Like a lot of them are professionals who are really being duped because of the quality of the human interactions that these AI systems can give you. It is, like I said, it's unprecedented. But we do have red flags from before. I wrote about this yesterday. It's this idea that early on we can't see all of the risks. And so we just plow full speed ahead. And then by the time we see all the risks, it's almost too late to systemically change them. And I think our best example of that is social media. Early on, we're like, cool, I can stay connected with my cousins and my friends. And look, here's my kids. And then fast forward 15 years, suddenly we have teenage girls in the throes of eating disorders and algorithms that are feeding terrible things to people and, manipulation through advertising and now the scraping of all the data and the images. And so we don't know, but we know it's not going to be great. We know there's going to be negative impacts because there always is with new technology. But I do think the potential for harm in this case at the rate that things are going is pretty high.
So we're going to talk about those three cases. We're going to talk about youth. We're going to talk about people in the work environment. We're going to talk about job industries. Talking about youths first. You part of your title is Responsible AI Strategist. What is responsible AI strategy for youths?
I think it's like a broad systemic thing. AI, responsible innovation in general, is trying to make sure that we adopt new technologies in ways that actually serve humanity and don't cause harm instead of the other way around. When it comes to kids and youth, I I think that means a lot of different things. I think that means us as adults taking responsibility to understand this technology alongside them and having conversations with them about it. I think that it's also a responsibility of adults and education systems to help students navigate it instead of banning it outright because these kids are going to be entering a world where this is going to be extremely common. It's going to be a huge feature. In fact, there'll be hiring decisions made on whether or not they know how to leverage this technology. So banning it in schools completely doesn't make sense because we have a responsibility to prepare kids for the future. But I think systemically, like we have an obligation to protect kids from harm. And that is everybody's responsibility. And right now, it's kind of nobody's responsibility. It's almost like the gun debate that we see in the US, right? Is it the parents' job to keep things locked up? Is it the gun company's job to be regulated? Is it the government's job to regulate the gun control? Like, whose job is it to protect people? And nobody's really doing anything about that right now when it comes to AI and kids. And a lot is going to fall through the cracks before we get ahead of this thing. We still haven't even caught up from social media, right? How many kids do we have addicted to cell phones who are being fed algorithms that are manipulating the way they think, what they buy, collecting all of their data and brain rotting them essentially, with no regulation, nobody protecting them from predators, even online at this point, right? So we're so far behind in general that we need to kind of do better. But we're all doing our best too. It's not like people aren't doing things because they don't care. Nobody really knows what to do next, and our traditional systems um, for laws and for governance move so slow, and this technology is moving at warp speed every single day. Most recently, a few weeks ago, one of the latest, greatest, most cutting edge AI tools that was released was by OpenAI. It was a video generator called Sora 2. And it suddenly is possible to create hyper realistic videos, deepfake videos that you can put your own picture, your own video in, certain celebrities, people who are dead and can't even consent, hyper realistic to the point where nobody knows what's real or not real anymore. And so, with things advancing that quickly, and we still can't even figure out a way to stop kids from seeing terrible things on Instagram, it feels like we're a little behind.
So you mentioned a story or a few stories I can imagine where kids are getting advice from AI and they're unfortunately creating, choosing these acts that are very
Mm,
harmful, right? And in some cases leading to their death. We know that
mm,
if there was somebody who wasn't licensed and they were giving a child or a youth or anybody advice, and part of that advice was to go kill yourself, we know that that
yeah.
person would be arrested and they would be charged. So considering AI has done that, how has nobody walked in and said, "Hey, this needs to be regulated"? I would think the government would step in at some point.
And there are things happening. The earliest case was a chatbot with a company named, or the case that I know of, it may not be the first, a couple of years ago with a company called Character AI. And essentially, you know, the chatbot, the interactions with the chatbot are what led this young man to take his own life. And it was very tragic. His parents are suing the company, and that company, just as of a week ago, has announced that they are not going to let users on their platform be children anymore, but no way to verify that, right? So in California, they just passed a bunch of laws designed to protect children as a good starting point. Banning kids from platforms, reminding users regularly that what they're talking to is not real, having fines. There's some starting points, which is better than nothing. But the truth is, it's really easy to get around a lot of that stuff, and I don't know what the better solution is. I spent some time last week just experiencing how easy it might be to get my hands on deepfake nude apps, where I could take a picture of a classmate and remove their clothes and distribute it as a nude deepfake. And I found so many sites that were easy to access for me as posing as a teenager that really just say, you can't use this unless you're 18. Are you 18? You click a box and it's yes. Do I have a better solution? No. I know in the UK they've tried to implement, a verification system where you have to like show your driver's license and it has to be scanned, and there are issues with that too. But it's a tricky, depressing situation. I feel bad. I wish I had better solutions. I think awareness is important right now. I think a lot about the Dr. Seuss story, Horton Hears a Who. Do you remember that book? Horton's an elephant and he finds a flower and he can hear something coming from the flower. And there's a whole village of hundreds of people living on the flower, but nobody else can see them and hear them. And they're about to be destroyed. And they're all collectively yelling, "We are here, we are here." So somebody besides Horton knows that they're there and nobody can hear them. They find one little who up in a bedroom who wasn't contributing. And as soon as that who joins her voice in with everybody else's, suddenly they were heard. And so my hope, or what I'm trying to do right now anyway, is spread enough awareness so that people can collectively be like, "Oh yeah, That's not great. Now that I know more, I'm going to join my voice, and collectively we can ask for these things or demand better or demand accountability or start important conversations with youth and parents and schools about how to protect kids better.
What could a parent who's listening to this do?
Honestly, like I have 4 grown-up kids. They're all in college and beyond, and, I was fortunate enough to have good relationships with my kids, and so my answer is always just, like, sit and have conversations with your kids. Ask them how they are using AI. First of all, you need to know that they absolutely 100% are using it. It's baked into everything they're already using, but ask them how they're using it. Have them teach you how to use it, how they're using it. Know that it's baked into anything that they do, and know that where especially the teenagers are encountering a lot of this really negative related AI stuff is in Discord, in Snapchat. There has been issues where these companies have been specifically targeting teenage boys, 13 to 18, with apps like this. And so have those conversations with them openly. Talk to them about some of the risks. Talk to them about the fact, make sure we know that they know that the AI is an AI because kids are more savvy than we give them credit for technology wise. But keep the lines of communication open and model good behavior. Really like understand the technology they're using. I think we missed that boat as maybe our generation of parents. A lot of people were like, oh, my kids are on social media, but I don't do social media. That's dumb. I'm not going to do it. So we didn't really understand what was going on social media and in the infrastructure. And I think that we need to really understand it and have them help us understand it. And then advocate at your schools for um, education and rules and help other people figure it out and navigate it too. I do want to say though, like it sounds like I'm just like being negative, 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 and I do live a lot in that space, but I have to just tell you, like this is the most amazing technology that has ever existed. I use it every single day. Every new tool that comes out, I figure out, I leverage it. I know how to harness this in the most incredible ways. And if you use it, it can change your life forever in great ways. So, like any technology, it's good and it's bad. My very favorite human in the AI space, the most brilliant AI guy I know, is a guy named Christopher Penn. And he always says that generative AI is like a super serum from Captain America. It makes the good even better and the bad even worse. And I think having that balanced perspective matters. Like if you just walk away from this episode being like, oh my gosh, AI is going to ruin the world and I hate it. And this is the worst thing that's ever happened. We're all going to die. That's not how I want people to feel. I want people to feel empowered with knowledge, to also know that you can leverage this technology in amazing ways that will really help you and change your life and alleviate some of the pain points that you have. So I just want to make sure I'm saying that as well.
Let's talk about that super serum in the work environment. When is
Mm.
AI, in what instance is AI good for people in the work environment, and when is it not?
Mm. That is such a great question. And in the spirit of like true philosophy, which is essentially what I study, it depends. It depends on a lot of things. It depends on the job that you do, obviously. A lot of people talk about AI is going to take my job. And the reality is that everybody's job is a big basket full of all different tasks. Your job, your basket of tasks is very different than mine. And even if we had the exact same job, our tasks would look different. Something I really recommend for people is there's a GPT in ChatGPT that is called Jobs GPT by SmarterX. It's by a friend of mine, and it just takes your job. You give it your job, this AI tool, and it unbundles it into a list of probably the 15 or 20 tasks you do most, and tells you how AI can help you do each of those things. But really, at the end of the day, AI, and when I say AI throughout this episode, I mean generative AI. I don't mean, you know, every kind of AI that's even in your Google Traffics app and Netflix algorithm. But this generative AI excels in anything language based. So writing, translating. It's amazing at summarizing and paraphrasing and combining ideas and analyzing vast amounts of data and finding patterns or bridging connections between two things that might never make sense in the past. So, in those ways, it's super helpful, super amazing. saves hours and hours and hours of time. For when not to do it, it's murkier. A lot of it depends on your organization's attitude towards AI. Obviously, there's this kind of underground current of companies that are like, don't use AI, and then people are just using it anyway and not telling anybody about it. Uh, be careful if you deal with any sort of sensitive data, anything that belongs, private information that involves somebody else. Avoid putting that into at least free AI tools. Just, a lot of those models are training on your data and the uploads and the things that you give it. I would say probably be careful when you're using it for things that need to be absolutely accurate. Hallucinations are a real issue with AI, continue to be. And that means that the AI will tell you something with absolute confidence and it will be completely wrong. It will make up sources. It will change things by a little bit. It will give you a link that doesn't exist. So if it's something that has to be absolutely accurate and the stakes are high, um, check it or do it yourself. And anything involving relationships and people needs a certain element of humanity and people focus and people centeredness in it at all times. And then obviously don't use it in a way that manipulates or fools people or tricks people or, you know, in those in those ways.
I can imagine workers would be afraid to admit they're using AI because I'm of the mindset of if I'm using AI constantly and my boss or my company finds out that I'm using it for all of my tasks, then wouldn't that render me, you know, unneeded? So at that point, how many people in companies are using AI but would never admit it out of fear that it would render them, unnecessary in terms of their job and their positionality and whatnot. So, would we ever get to a place where there is like this overcurrent of people talking about AI, using it openly, and everybody sharing the fact that it's a part of their work DNA?
I think we will. I work with companies who are already like that. It really depends on the culture of your organization as well. And if there's a kind of a culture of openness and innovation about how you're leveraging this technology, and some of the organizations I work with, it's really like that. I'm working with one right now where we met individually with uh, their different departments and talked about how they're using it, identified with them all of their pain points or their bottleneck or the busy work or the things that don't work well, and trying to figure out ways that AI can streamline some of those things and doing it with the support of the company. And that's obviously the best possible scenario. With that said, I have not found uh, in any way, shape, or form any AI tool that could replace an entire job of somebody at this point. It requires too much human oversight, and if you're leveraging it correctly, it makes you even better at your job. It makes you smarter. It helps you think more deeply and find deeper connections because you're not drowning in the busy work. You have time to be creative and focus on the parts of your job that you love, and hopefully that makes you more engaged and you give more. And I see that happen quite a bit. I see that happen with myself and the work that I do and having more time to do the things I really care about. But it's just a matter of knowing what those things are and having a company that makes it safe to talk about, safe to experiment, and, you know, work through kind of that messy process a little bit. But even if your company's not like that, it's super important that you experiment on your own. Start accounts with ChatGPT, Claude AI, Google Gemini, at the very least, and just start experimenting with them. Use your personal email address, keep it completely separate from your work stuff, and see what it's capable of. Start conversations with these tools about something you already know about and see how well it does at working with you on those things or helping you think differently or more deeply about those things so that you'll know when and where it's not doing great. And then really that's all I did to get good at was use it all the time for everything. Everything I just thought, I wonder if AI could help me with this. And I would just try it. And sometimes it would work and sometimes it wouldn't. But the truth is your organization will have you using it at some point. So if you're waiting for them to train you and green light you, you're going to be waiting a really long time. take control of your own learning and your own future and just start experimenting with it and how it might be able to help you on your own time.
Like what you talked about when you said that you can't see AI replacing jobs in the sense of all the tasks and the nuance that people need to deal with on a day-to-day basis. However, there's this fear that AI is going to eradicate some job markets. Is
Mm.
Are there jobs right now? Are there markets that are extremely vulnerable to AI? And where does ethics come into play? If AI can replace jobs in certain markets, should they?
Mm. Such great questions. There are, based on the industry reports and reports that come out from the World Economic Forum and Microsoft, there are specific lists of jobs that could potentially be more at risk than others. Call centers, as the AI voice is increasingly good at deciphering what you want, communicating. There's obviously a lot of jobs that probably are higher at risk. And segments. So new grads from university, we're a little worried about because a lot of those entry level jobs may be able to, AI may be able to take on a lot of the responsibilities that would typically go to new college grads. So that is something we're worried about. I worry about entire uh, parts of the world. If you think about countries that exist, that their entire economy depends on them doing essentially like gig work and operating call centers and doing things for the United States. And if what does it mean for the world if there are mass swaths of people who are all unemployed at the same time? Your question about ethics is a good one. And it really comes down to the company. There are companies who have made a big deal about replacing large segments of their company with AI. And really, a lot of companies care more about money and publicity than they do about real people, which many of us, you and I, probably would argue is unethical. But at this point, there's no incentive or reason for them not to do it. So perhaps the ethical companies will keep people and, teach them how to leverage this technology to do more, or the government steps in and incentivizes businesses to keep people in some way to be able to do more. I don't have the same utopian view that a lot of the tech companies have, which is, oh, yeah, everyone will be unemployed, but we'll all just sit around and be able to chase our hobbies and do everything that we want. And that's unrealistic, right? They've thrown out this idea of a universal basic income where everybody just gets some money. But we both know that there will be people who are unfairly disadvantaged in any scenario where that happens. And uh, it's it's a pipe dream. There needs to be a better plan in place. With that said, every technology brings in with it job disruption. If you think about maybe like our grandmas or moms, a lot of women, the highest population of job for women in like the mid 20th century were connecting phone calls on the switchboards in those big rooms where they connected phone calls. And when they laid off those women. That was the biggest mass layoff of female labor in the history of the world, because suddenly, you didn't need manual phone operators, and everyone was probably saying the same thing. But if you look at the telecom industry today and how many people it employs, it's millions, millions of people. And so it's hard to know what new jobs this will bring or how our jobs will evolve and change. But the one thing we know for sure is that we need to at least understand this technology and know how to use it ourselves. There's going to be very few jobs that are going to not have any AI embedded in them whatsoever. But if you're thinking about what to do, go be a plumber or an electrician. They are going to be, I'm predicting right now, the richest, most in demand positions in the future.
It's interesting you say that. I had a guest a while ago, and we talked about blue collar work, and his whole identity and his business is really focused on building awareness around blue collar work and the luxury side of it. He talks about his own accumulation of success and what he's been able to achieve. Unfortunately, he's fighting against a current where a lot of families are kind of putting their kids in a position to say you need to be a doctor or a
Mm.
lawyer, those typical white collar jobs, etc. So blue
Hmm.
collar jobs have lost their attractiveness to the point.
It's coming
Yeah,
back.
and it's interesting you say that because I think it's something that should come back, right? And do
Agree.
people want to be plumbers? Do they want to be carpenters? That's typically not the first dream you hear people talk about, or even if you go to kids in a elementary school and say, "What do you want to be when you grow
Yeah.
up?" It's not the number one answer, probably the two or three answer, but it is something,
Mhm.
as you mentioned, that's important because it's the one thing AI will not be able to replace.
And we didn't see that coming, right? Like we were all like, oh, the first thing AI is going to do is take over the checkouts at the grocery store and the McDonald's cashiers, and then probably all of the blue collar type job or manual labor job. That's how robots are going to happen. No, it came for the white collar jobs. Who knew?
Interesting. So I have to ask. I had this conversation with somebody around AI when it first came out, and I'm
Mhm.
still of, I guess, very conflicting ideologies when it comes to AI. I think there's a lot of value in it, but I also
Totally.
don't think there's a lot of value in it in some cases, and meaning that
Mhm.
it's structurally used as a tool, and it can be great in terms of resources and things like that, but it shouldn't be a thinking pot for people, or a way to discover or analyze or ideate. That's the part I have a challenge with because I think it takes away from creativity. In my role, a lot of the things I focus around is inclusive leadership. So for me, the
Mm.
nuance of having to build relationships with people, and everybody's unique and having unique backgrounds, I think there is the responsibility I have to learn about those individuals, and I can't learn about those individuals through AI, and I don't think AI should ever be a part of that. So I am on the fence. I don't think AI is bad. I'm probably very neutral about it. However, the one question I have, Rebecca, is there are millions, probably billions of people have put in information into AI. Where is that information going, and what is happening with that information? Because that's a lot of thought, questions, uh, comments. How much data is this thing accumulating, and what are they doing with it?
Oh, that's a loaded question. Honestly, the simple answer is that we don't know because nobody is making them tell us. So early on, it was being used to retrain the model. The more data and the more human language that these models had, the better they performed, which is why they got so good so quick. But you also have to remember now the tools that we have now, there are privacy settings. The paid versions allegedly don't train on your data. Who knows, right? Because we can't look under the hood. There's no transparency. There's no accountability. We don't really know for sure, but they're telling us now that the paid versions don't train on your data. But if you think about for a second how much data is already collected about you every time you visit a website or you Google something or lives in your Google Drive or every time your cell phone tracks everywhere you go or you make a list or you watch something or you spend more than 5 seconds on a TikTok, there's massive amounts of data. And the data conversation is top of mind because one of the major ethical concerns in my industry is around these data centers that are being built all over the US and all over Canada that are designed to support this mass usage and storage and creation and collection of data that have really severe environmental impacts that nobody is talking about. The most impactful book I've ever read about I read this summer that just came out. It's called Empire of AI by Karen Howe, and she explores the whole story of how we got here. She had behind the scenes access to the whole thing and all the unethical practices that went around and around and around through all these companies and how these data centers were built in third world countries and destroyed communities and now this is happening as quickly as possible in the United States before anybody really knows what's going on. And there's no real legislation preventing it, and in Canada as well. And so that data question is a big one because there's so much data being collected on all of us, not just by these AI tools, but there's a big underground business of data brokering. For example, your Loblaws Real Canadian Superstore card they started out giving you tons of great points because they wanted you to use it all the time. Now they don't. They really are collecting your data, everything about how you shop, when you shop, what you buy, and selling it to other companies so that they can advertise directly to you and building these big profiles on you so they can better target you with ads. The risk is with generative AI being so amazing at working with data that they've noticed one of the big red flags is that the manipulation capabilities of these tools is off the charts. The ability to persuade and change people's minds based on all the data that's available about them and it being able to adapt exactly to you is scary. They experimented, I say they, researchers, and this was ethically gray, in basically a subreddit for conspiracy theorists and put AIs posing as people in there. And it was able to change people's minds, something like 80 or 90% better than the most persuasive humans. And so, on a big, like more existential level, like as an ethicist, I worry about things like that. And going full circle back to the moment that I was like, I need to actually start studying the risks. I was thinking, this was probably 4 months in, if we would have had this tool during the pandemic and everyone were to ask their ChatGPT, should I get vaccinated? What would it tell people and who would get to decide? Would it tell you something different than it would tell me? Would it tell based on the fact that I was a woman or what it knew about me or try and align with my existing political beliefs? But who would get to decide? And nobody could answer that. We don't know still totally how these operate under the hood and why they act the way they act and why they do the things they do. And there's a lot that we don't understand, even the people who are building this technology. And that made me uncomfortable. And I had questions and I still have questions. And I probably have more questions now, but um, I just, we could talk forever about the risks. And I think knowledge is power, and us thinking about using these tools intentionally. There's not a lot of things we can't control. And this is a framework that I teach a lot because usually when we get to this point in the conversation, people feel like I felt, initially overwhelmed. There's all these things wrong. This is like horrible. And I eventually had to sort things into three very specific buckets. The things that are completely out of my control, right? Like I can't control how these models were trained, that they were trained on flawed data sets that were misrepresentative and unfairly biased and bad information and the very armpit of the internet. Like I can't fix that. I can't change it. I can't change the fact that they're building major data centers that are harming the environment. I can't change that we don't have enough laws, right? The second bucket is maybe areas where I might have influence. Maybe my organization, maybe by going out and talking to people, maybe on my social media platforms with lots of followers. Where can I have influence to help make a difference? Even if it's just at a local level, asking for laws, asking for information about a data center that's being proposed. But most importantly, what do I directly control? What is directly within my ability to control? And that is ensuring that I don't use AI in a way that sacrifices human relationships or causes people harm, that I fact check everything so that I'm not contributing to a mis and disinformation problem. I am checking everything for bias that is baked right into this, that is not representative of how society is today, and making sure I'm not perpetuating issues that we thought we had left in the past that are now resurfacing. I can control how I speak to people about it. I can control my own future to a certain point, my own level of understanding of it. I just have to focus on here's what I can control, here's what I can influence, and here's what I need to know about, but I can't be losing all of my sleep over this. I need to be a little more proactive and act on things that are within my control.
So who's AI serving, considering all that?
It depends on the type of AI and how it's being used. I would tell you, in response to kind of your questions about where AI adds value, for someone like me who uses it regularly and who, in fairness, like strategic AI is what I figure out and do for a living, it serves me in ways that I can give it extremely complicated research or topics that I'm trying to understand that don't exist yet, right? And have it challenge my thinking, act as a PhD level thought partner and challenge my thinking, push me to think differently about this. One of my favorite ways to use it is to gap check, especially coming from a place where I don't have lived experience in a lot of different areas. I like to use the AI tools to identify what I might be missing or how someone else might be perceiving this situation or how I may be observing it from a place of privilege or a blind spot that I don't see and have it challenge and push back on all the ways I see the world to help me be better. Is it perfect? No. Is it better than if I were to have none of that? Absolutely. One of my favorite stories is about Sally Ride, who is the first American woman in space. And before she left, she'd been working with a team of the most brilliant people in the world, um, literal rocket scientists. They asked her if 100 tampons would be enough for her 3-day trip to space. And they're smart guys, but for anyone listening, nobody needs 100 tampons in 3 days. The truth was they just didn't have any lived experience being a female. They didn't understand. They couldn't make sense of it. And hopefully, in some ways, AI can be used as a tool to help us identify things we don't understand and think about things differently and in ways that maybe will help mitigate harm and bring us closer together and help us develop empathy in situations and see things from other points of view. So I like to use it to challenge me to think more deeply and to spot things that I might be missing about myself personally. But admittedly, probably nobody else is doing that, or very few people are doing that. But it's my hope that we can build systems and people can help build them from every community, that then maybe we can test laws or really terrible decisions against real people, but also systems that are designed to spot things like that, that people are very clearly missing on a regular basis. So that's one of my hopes for the future.
Yeah, and to kind of branch off of that, when you talk about the future, you mentioned some words there that really sparked something I was um, learning the other day, which was artificial general intelligence. And as I was learning more about this, I was really getting nervous because the AI that people are using now, they're using it for certain tools and tasks and whatnot. But from what I understand, artificial general intelligence is designed to have the same cognitive thinking process that human beings do in terms of reasoning, deliberating, all of those sort of things. So, that to me, if we're not even regulating AI and something like this where they're going to start to think, it's starting to think like us, to make decisions like us, etc., where does that go? Where does that go for us? Because the first thing I think about, Rebecca, is Terminator, and I think about Skynet,
I know.
So I'm like,
I know. But I want to point out that we're conditioned to think that
mm,
way. If you think about every movie involving robots in the future you've ever seen, we've been conditioned already to automatically think of robots taking over the world. The only visions we've ever seen of robots in the future are very dystopian. And they all hinge on this, the robots are going to become sentient and come alive, right? And we're conditioned that way because that's all we've ever seen. It's important to know, like, these are just honestly glorified autocorrect machines on the background that are really good at imitating human language. The idea of artificial general intelligence really just means an AI that is better than or as good as humans at all or most human tasks. And we're probably there, at least with the cognitive things right now, the latest models reason you can see their full thought process as they're air quotes like thinking through all the ways to handle a task. And it has a very comprehensive thought process. I would say that that is not something that I worry about. I don't worry about the robots coming to life and taking over the world. What I do worry about is power dynamics, but I worry about that in society in general. I'm sure you do too, based on your position that you work and this where you're situated in the work that you do. But I think everything comes down to power. And so I worry less about the robots coming to life and more about the people who are in charge of the robots. And really that is 5 men who own big tech companies with absolutely no oversight or regulation. And I worry about that more than I worry about robots coming to life and taking over the world.
So, what would be responsible AI adoption if you were in control of all of it?
It's tough. It's a tough thing, and I don't know that there's one universal answer for every scenario. We've learned this just from watching major companies try and adopt technology. Johnson and Johnson, for example, were really early adopters and they tried lots of things and they tried to put in these big company-wide adoption policies and roll things out for their whole company. And they learned after that pilot that uh, there's only a handful of things it was really good at, and individual teams and groups were best suited to determine where it worked best for them. So, like what would work for the finance team would be completely different than how it might work for the communications department. And so, it's hard to have big, overarching, sweeping laws, uh, that would apply to everybody in every situation. I would want to see some way that uh, it's not training on people's data automatically and then using their data against them, especially children. One of the other most interesting things I've read recently in the last 2 weeks is a report from a group called Policy Horizons. They're actually a group that works with the government of Canada, and they do what's called foresight and forecasting, which has existed in business for a long time, but we do it a lot in AI futures, which I study. And it's basically trying to predict all the things that are going to happen in the future related to AI. It's actually super cool. And they make a list of all the ways this could go wrong and all the ways this is going to change everything as we know it. And a few of the things they flagged were people aren't going to trust anything online anymore. The internet model as we know it is going to completely change. But also, children today, data is going to be collected about them and used against them in ways that will alter their futures forever. So I would have more control, allow people to have more control over the data that is collected about them and then used against them, especially children. I would create programs and systems that trained every single person on how to use these tools and leverage these tools. Gave everybody a certain baseline element of AI literacy, uh, everybody, seniors, adults, like the people, the generation just ahead of us who didn't grow up with even email, who have no idea what's going on. I would want everybody to have knowledge and training. I would want these tech companies to pay for it and to invest in society in ways that made it better. I would want there to be oversight and accountability because right now they're just like, oh, don't worry, like, well, we've got this, we'll be good, we promise, pinky promise, And so I think there would need to be like oversight. I think it would be nice if we could have some sort of universal, like UN type guidelines. And I know UNESCO is an organization that I'm a huge fan of that's trying to do that. I would have it taught in schools and talked about in schools and have students involved in the lawmaking process and the policymaking process at every level, since we're building it for a world that they're going to live in and they understand the technology. There's so many things. The answer is there's so many things I would do. And I would make sure that there was a more diverse representative group of people building this rather than 24-year-old white guys from Silicon Valley who were making essentially most of the decisions about how these are trained and how these are used. I would bring more people to the party so that more people know you don't need 100 tampons in space.
That would be very useful. That little bit of
Agree.
information. So tell me, what has been, if you could think about your favorite or most successful memory using AI, what comes
Hmm.
to mind?
I have like a couple of like real like light bulb moments, essentially just time, the first time I saw ChatGPT was huge for me. I think the next one was there's a tool called Notebook LM, which is one of my favorites. You can give it essentially anything, any piece of legislation, a PDF research paper, uh, anything, and it will immediately turn it into a podcast of two people talking about it in absolutely 100% human sounding voices, just like us right now. And that is amazing to me because I can give it 50 research papers on a topic and it will synthesize it into a conversational two-person podcast that sounds 100% real, that gives me access to that information in a way that I wouldn't have had it before. I know for myself, I still need to read every word. But when I'm trying to synthesize things across different domains, for example, how, resiliency and brain science might relate to deep fakes in elementary schools, it will generate something for me that's never existed before. And because it's so good at data, it will find any intersecting point and bring those together. So I have a son who plays basketball in college, and he was taking a financial accounting course that he hated. And so we gave this Notebook LM tool all of his PowerPoints and slide decks and class notes and had it generate a 10-minute podcast for him that explained everything in basketball analogies. And he aced it. It was like a total win. And those parts of it make me excited. And that for me is a huge win. That's amazing. So being able to access information in new ways. The other aha moment was deep research, it's called. So Google Gemini is my favorite tool for this, but you can ask it to uh, conduct a deep research report for you on anything you want. It could be the history of Good Life Fitness and bagels in South America. And it will return you within 10 minutes like a 50-page dissertation style research report with hundreds of cited sources telling you all about that thing. And then you can take it and turn it into a 10-minute podcast. So that level of accessibility, as someone who, again, curiosity is my core value, that is amazing. Like that's phenomenal. I think that that's just what a time to be alive. So I swing wildly between this like awe of what a time to be alive and this existential dread of, oh no, like what a time to be raising kids. Like it's just kind of this, and all of it can be true, and it is all true, and we're all living it together. But I think we have, if nothing else, an ethical and moral responsibility to support each other through this point in time, whether that is helping each other figure it out or advocating for people who aren't in a position to advocate for themselves, be it kids, be it, people we don't even know who are going to lose their jobs in another country. So
Mm.
that's kind of where I'm at with all of it.
If you can tell the average person right now one valuable thing that they could start doing with AI, and then one awareness thing that they need to have to make sure it's safe for them, what would those two things be?
My biggest piece of advice is to download the three major large language models onto your phone or on your computer. Visit the sites ChatGPT, Claude AI, which is actually my favorite, and Google Gemini. Set up accounts with your personal email address. I can't stress this enough. And the reason I keep mentioning that is because there's, again, it's murky. There's no real rules, but there was a politician in the UK who someone put in a freedom of information, like, or a PIPA, request for all of his communications. And because I guess it was set up with his work account, they had access to all of his ChatGPT history. And we know the number one way people are using these tools is for advice and therapy and as a friend often. So set it up with your personal, keep it private, experiment, learn, talk to them, see what they're good at. It's actually really fun. So just treat it as play. I think we forget. I think as adults, we get set in this place where we feel like we know what's going on and we like change less and less. And we're not used to being in this uncomfortable relearning space or this disorienting dilemma or this messy middle where we're trying to learn something new. And we have to remember kids exist there all the time. And so we need to go in and be curious, figure out what they're good at, but also always keep in mind that there's a lot we don't know. Take every piece of advice, don't take it as science. The tendency for people, especially our age, is to treat it like a Google. And it's not a Google. It is kind of like a Google, but it returns information in a way that it sounds absolutely confident when it is not. So use it as a tool in that way, but verify, fact check, maintain your critical thinking skills. And my last piece of advice would be to embrace radical humanity. Be more human than you have ever been in your whole life. I I went from having a really polished LinkedIn presence for a long time to embracing this idea of being radically human and just posting things as I thought about them, not losing sleep if I had typos or if my images weren't like filtered because I think people are craving radical humanity more than ever. And so lean into that, focus on those things. If there are things AI can help you with, let AI help you with those things if it gives you more time and bandwidth to be radically human. So that would be my best advice.
Interesting. Thank you for that. I find it interesting we're at the point where being radically human is now a niche because everything is just so curated.
Well, yeah. And I don't know, you're probably the same, like, especially over the last 6 months, I keep returning to this idea where people are like, "Oh, we have to make AI more human," and lately I'm like, "Have you met humans, like, on the internet? They are terrible." Like, I I don't want AI to be like that.
Mm.
I want people to be more radically human too. I want us all to be better humans and hopefully find ways to leverage AI in ways that make us all better humans and, maybe help fix some of the problems that are happening instead of making them worse. That would be the best case scenario. And I do think it's possible, even if we don't see the way yet. I think there's ways to do it, but it starts with us focusing on what we can control and what we influence, and at least gaining our own understanding of these tools and having a clear vision for the future.
Amen to that. Now, this is the part of the conversation where I turn it to the guest to read their letter to their former self. So I'll
Hmm.
give you the floor.
Yeah. Well, I didn't get into like a lot of like my kind of life path that led me kind of even to this point. But I had kind of like a non-traditional path. I met my husband when I was 18. I got married super young and I had like 3 kids by the time I was 21. And that took all of my time. So I entered the workforce late as a fitness instructor at Good Life Fitness and worked my way up the ladder, doing different things until I finally one day got to fly on the jet with the CEO one time, which was kind of the pinnacle for me. And I really felt for a long time like I had missed my chance, that I'd missed my life, that I'd missed my shot. So I wrote a letter to my former self who was in the thick of raising kids, and I wrote it actually to myself while I was working at Good Life Fitness with you. It took me back to that moment. So here's my letter to myself back then. Dear Rebecca, first of all, you're exactly where you're supposed to be right now. I know it doesn't feel that way. You're exhausted. You're juggling the kids and a demanding job, wondering what's next. But I need you to trust something. Every single step you're taking is preparing you for work you can't even imagine yet. That time you spent as a fitness instructor, learning to motivate people and getting comfortable on a stage and reading a room, that's going to matter. Being a talent acquisition specialist, learning to see potential in people and connect them with purpose, that's going to matter too. And when you make the move into education communications, navigating crisis and complexity, learning to build trust through uncertainty, all of it matters. But you're not going to end up anywhere near where you think. That feeling you have right now that you're supposed to help people become their best selves at Good Life, that doesn't go away, it just gets redirected. You'll help leaders become the kind of people who can navigate impossible complexity with courage and clarity. You'll help organizations figure out how to innovate without losing their humanity. And the truth is, technology is going to reshape everything. Trust truth and what it means to be human. And you're going to find yourself right in the middle of it, helping people make sense of the mess. Not because you're a technologist, because you understand people, because you can translate complexity into clarity, and because every winding step of your random path taught you something essential. You'll stand on stages across North America. You'll work with schools and police forces and governments and corporations. You'll get degrees, many of them. You'll build frameworks. You'll help people. And the beautiful part is one day you'll find yourself on a podcast with an old friend from these Good Life Fitness days, and you'll realize the path that felt so random and restless was actually taking you exactly where you needed to be all along. So every skill you're learning, every person you're meeting, every hard thing you're navigating, it's all preparing you for what matters most. Trust the journey, even when it doesn't make sense yet. I'm proud of you.
It's amazing.
Love me.
That's amazing. How did you feel writing that?
I wrote something kind of similar about 6 months ago. There was a trend going around, like, I met my earlier self for coffee and kind of looking at that, and you know, that gave me the same kind of feeling. That girl, she did her best, and I'm grateful for her. She grinded through a lot, and she always hoped and knew there was something better, and I'm grateful for all of it. I wish I could just tell her it was all gonna work out. So I'm glad I had the chance now.
It's awesome. Is there anything, Rebecca, that we didn't talk about today that you wanted to touch on?
I don't think so. I think, I just want people to feel empowered and not fearful about the future. I think a lot of it's still within all of our control, and, um, I think knowledge is power, but I don't want to instill fear in people. Um, I want people to feel empowered, and I think that's something that goes in the "we can control" bucket. And all of the things that make you you and good at your jobs, those things are all going to translate into whatever happens next. And so lean into those things and gain some skills with these AI tools. And I think I think it'll all be okay in the end. I really do. We are extremely adaptive as a species and as humanity, and I think we will continue to be.
Thank you for your time today, Rebecca. This was good. This is a really great conversation.
Great to be here. Thanks so much for having me, Dwayne.